What's up? This is Technically Correct with Tyler Bischoff. On today's show, Geno Smith has been bad, but he might be back as the Raiders quarterback next season. Plus, the Golden Knights, tough to believe, went to overtime again. And UNLV basketball takes on a team that looks a lot like them. Today's show, big shout out to Alex who sponsored the show, and he wanted to say that it was brought to you by Southern California Bulldog Rescue, which is where we adopted Shuro, our English bulldog. Sorry, I'm fading in and out from the mic. But shout out to Alex for sponsoring the show. And adopt, don't shop, and you can get something just like this. Here we go. Geno Smith could be back as the Raiders starting quarterback next season. Geno has been having one of the worst seasons of any quarterback in the NFL this year. It's one of his worst seasons since his first couple of years as a starter with the Jets back in 2013 and 14. Now, Geno Smith is not going to play this weekend, most likely, due to a shoulder injury, but he could be back next year as the Raiders starter. Now, it makes a lot of sense to cut Geno Smith. If you just look at his contract, next year he's got a cap hit of $26.5 million, and $18.5 million of that is guaranteed. But on the third day of the league season, so 3 days into the offseason, he has an additional $8 million that becomes guaranteed. So that would be an obvious date to cut Geno Smith by. You save Mark Davis $8 million. You also save $8 million against the cap. He would still carry a dead cap hit of $18.5 million, even if they cut him, but that's not the full $26.5 million. However, the free agent class of quarterbacks is pretty terrible. Daniel Jones was going to be the best free agent. Still might be, because the other names are Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson. Do you like Tyrod Taylor? Do you want to give Trey Lance a shot? So there really isn't anything there. And there's a chance that the Geno Smith decision for the Raiders simply comes down to draft position. If the Raiders lose out and are picking first overall, they'll cut Geno Smith and draft a quarterback. Might do so if they're picking number 2 as well. But if the Raiders win a game or 2 and end up picking 4th or 7th or 10th, can they let Geno Smith go? Like, what are you going to do at quarterback next season? You're going to cut Geno Smith and let Aiden O'Connell start again? You're going to sign Trey Lance? It just seems that the Raiders might need Geno Smith if they're not picking at the top of the draft. That certainty in your draft pick is what would give you the opportunity to cut Geno Smith, especially if you already have to pay him $18.5 million either way, unless they trade for Kyler Murray. This rumor has been out there for the last couple of weeks about the Raiders and Kyler Murray. His season is over. He has a foot injury. He's got 2 more years on his contract, and Arizona could presumably try to trade him. If Arizona cuts Kyler Murray, he has a $57 million dead cap hit. So that's probably not going to happen. I would say, like, the good idea behind it is that Kyler Murray is 28 years old. And I think he probably fits into the tier of quarterbacks that, if he's under this top tier play caller, could have a really good season, right? We've seen Brock Purdy do it. We've seen Tua do it, where guys that are probably not a top 10 quarterback have these huge years because their play callers are really good, have a really good season. So that could happen with Kyler Murray. The problem is that Kyler Murray's not good. Like, he's got to be in the perfect scenario for that to even be a possibility, because Kyler Murray's been in the NFL for 7 years, and we're still waiting on Kyler Murray to be good. So I think trading for Kyler Murray would be a disaster of a choice for the Raiders. I think you'd be better off just saying, it's Aiden O'Connell time yet again, right? Like, I think you'd be better off if you fell to 7th in the draft, just draft a quarterback in like round 4 and let him start, right? That's Aiden O'Connell again. So trading for Kyler Murray would be trying to do exactly what the Raiders did this past season. Go find somebody else's starter that hasn't had very much success, and Kyler's had even less than what Geno Smith and the Seahawks did, and see if that works for you. When in reality, this team needs to be rebuilding, basically tanking, right? If you're able to get the number 1 or number 2 pick in the draft, take your quarterback there potentially, but outside of that, you might not be getting a quality quarterback, and there's no point in trying to force things with Kyler Murray in a trade, who's shown us now for 7 years that he's just not going to be that type of difference maker. You're going to have to hire the offensive play caller that's terrific to make Kyler Murray work, and that's just not worth it when you have to trade for and then still pay Kyler Murray quite a bit of money. Now, on the idea of the Raiders drafting a quarterback, Pro Football Focus had a mock draft posted this week with the Raiders picking second, which is where they currently sit, and they have the Raiders taking Dante Moore, the quarterback out of Oregon. The Athletic had a mock draft last week, so this was before the Raiders had moved up to 2. They were in the 4 spot. The Athletic in that one actually had the Raiders trading up to 2 and taking Dante Moore. Both mocks had Fernando Mendoza going number 1 overall, by the way. So we have a consensus. The Raiders are going to take Dante Moore. The interesting part on the quarterbacks, though, is both of those mock drafts had Mendoza and Moore going first and second. And by the way, the most recent one from PFF had the Rams trading up to 1 and taking Mendoza, because as of now, if the Giants are picking first, they probably won't take a quarterback. They'll probably stick with Jackson Dart, assuming he survives this season. But Mendoza 1, Moore 2 was the consensus on both of those. But if you look at the other quarterbacks, the Athletic did have Ty Simpson, who's Alabama's quarterback, going in the middle of round 1. So there was a third quarterback there. But Pro Football Focus, their story, they basically were like, Ty Simpson looks like he's going back to college, so we're not putting him in this mock draft. Same for Arch Manning. If that's the case, and these mock drafts are kind of the reality of the quarterback situation, having the number 1 pick is going to be very, very important, because if it's just Mendoza and just Dante Moore, you might not get a shot if you fall back to 3. If you fall back to 7, forget about it. But that's why losing is important for the Raiders, because the number 1 pick, maybe number 2, is going to be important if you want a quarterback. Now, it's December. We see changes in the draft from what's expected in December to April all the time. Jackson Dart was not a first-round draft pick at this time last year. He got taken towards the end of the first round. So there's all the chance that somebody, maybe Simpson or Manning, actually declares. Maybe there's a draft candidate that impresses, and hey, we can take him in the middle of the first round somewhere else. Or maybe Dante Moore or Fernando Mendoza just slide. Maybe they're bad in the playoffs. They still declare, and they're just not that good, and they fall a little bit, and you can take them a little bit later. But if you want that quarterback security, you need to be picking early in the first round, and that's where the Geno Smith decision becomes interesting, because of that third day of the league year, because that's a deadline for an extra $8 million. If the Raiders are going to cut him, they need to cut him by then, right? They don't need to wait around for the whole draft process and be like, all right, can we trade up or not trade up? Do we like these guys, not like these guys? They need to know then. And if they're going to cut him, they need to know that they can take a quarterback in the first or second pick or wherever they're drafting. And that's why the draft certainty is so important, because the decisions you're going to make at quarterback are going to be based off of that entirely. Now, for the number 1 pick, FTN Fantasy, which does DVOA as their projections, after last week's results where the Titans won and the Raiders lost, the Raiders jumped up to a 45.1% chance to have the number 1 pick in the NFL draft. That is the highest mark of any team. Tennessee fell to 20.5%. They basically flipped. Those numbers were almost identical but opposite last week. So Raiders lose out. Number 1 pick is yours. If you're looking at a top 5 pick, they have a 92% chance of that happening, according to these DVOA projections. Their projected wins for the rest of the season is 2.9, which is the lowest in the league. Tennessee is at 3.0, and then Cleveland and New York are both over 4 for projected wins. Key there, despite the Raiders and Titans having almost identical projected wins at the end of the year, the key there is the strength of schedule tiebreaker, which as of now, the Raiders would win over Tennessee for that number 1 pick. So if they finish with the same record, the Raiders will probably have the number 1 pick over the Tennessee Titans, despite beating this year, which you would feel like would be a tiebreaker in the opposite way. Head-to-head loss gets you the number 1 pick. That is not how they do it. It is strength of schedule tiebreaker. Now, Raiders this weekend take on the Eagles. I think first thing to get to, because we're talking about draft picks here, can the Raiders win and kind of screw this up? Eagles have lost 3 straight games, and the offense has scored 21, 15, and 19 in those games. 2 of those games were against Chicago and Dallas, teams that do not have good defenses. So the points for the Eagles might not be very high, which is how upsets can happen. This year, Philadelphia 16th in EPA per play for the entire season. Raiders defense is 23rd. So I don't expect the Eagles to put up like 30 points, but they should still be able to move the ball and score, right? The Broncos didn't put up a bunch of points last week, but they controlled the ball pretty well. They did not have a ton of negative plays, and they stayed on the field for a long time. Wouldn't be shocked if the Eagles do something like that. And on the flip side, the Eagles defense is 10th in EPA per play. They've had a pretty good defensive season. Not top of the league, win the Super Bowl good like we've seen in some years past from Philly, but they've still been good. And the Raiders offense is 31st in EPA per play. Yes, Tennessee is worse. But Kenny Pickett is starting, which, I don't know, does that make it better or worse? I don't know if that's a downgrade or not. But I do feel the same way about the Broncos game that I do this one. The Raiders shouldn't win. There's no reason the Raiders offense is going to put up a bunch of points in this game, but they're playing an opponent whose offense struggles, who doesn't score a lot of points and plays a lot of one-possession games. Both the Eagles and the Broncos, almost all their games are one-possession games without a high-scoring offense. So you are going to be a turnover, a special teams play away. If you have the big punt return instead of giving up the punt return touchdown to Denver, you might win the game. Again, will they? Probably not, but it's possible. Kenny Pickett's at quarterback, most likely this week. I do find it interesting that I know Greg Olsen, the offensive coordinator for the Raiders, got asked about it, and we've seen a couple of stories about it. They're like, Kenny Pickett, he knows the Eagles system from being in Philadelphia. Is that going to help? Because I don't think that's going to actually help. Now, his 2 gloves are going to help. I love that he wears 2 gloves. He's got small hands. I don't know if you guys are aware, but hand size, very important in the NFL. Quarterbacks need big hands. Most quarterbacks have average to big hands in the NFL, and Kenny Pickett, I believe, still has the smallest hands in the league. I haven't double-checked that on the new guys that came in this year, but Kenny Pickett has very, very small hands. Fumbling problem for Kenny Pickett. Now, Raiders and Eagles are playing, which is fun because we get a running back comparison. The Raiders thought they drafted the next Saquon Barkley when they took Ashton Jeanty 6th overall. And it looks like they did. They were just off by 1 year. This stat is from NFL Researcher on Twitter. Only 2 players this year have 50-plus carries go for 0 or negative yards this season. Saquon Barkley and Ashton Jeanty, who both have 56. Both of these running backs are getting stuffed to the line of scrimmage or behind the line of scrimmage all the time. Shocking in Philadelphia. Not too big of a surprise here with the Raiders, given the state of the offensive line, given that the Raiders didn't address the offensive line in the offseason. But also, neither of these running backs is breaking off big plays. Barkley has just 3 carries for 20 yards or more this year, and Jeanty has one single play for 20-plus yards on the ground. So you're getting stuffed to the line of scrimmage, you're getting hit in the backfield, and you're also not getting any sort of payoff on these big plays when you hand the ball off. That's not ideal for these 2 teams. So the Raiders nailed it. They drafted the next Saquon Barkley. They just got the bad season of Saquon Barkley out of Ashton Jeanty. A couple of the things from this game that I'm curious to see. Pete Carroll said Caleb Rogers is going to play the whole game at right guard. Is he any good, right? It's going to be 2 straight games, assuming he makes it through the game. 2 straight games where Caleb Rogers plays the whole time. Is he any good, right? Because that's what we've been waiting to see. Play the guy you draft in the 3rd round at a position where you've been looking for somebody to play well. and see if he can do it for not only this season, but the future. Also, the wide receiver position, what do we see? Dante Thornton is expected to be back. Does Jack Bech remain the number 2? Those are your 2 rookie wide receivers. Does that hierarchy, again, it was Trey Tucker, Jack Bech, and then Tyler Lockett. Where does Thornton fit in coming back from a concussion? He's a little bit different of a player from Lockett and Bech. So how do they use Thornton? Does he get a lot of snaps the way Bech did this past week? Also, do they throw the ball to Ashton Genty? Right, at least in creative ways? Is it just dump offs? He's had quite a uptick in targets over the last 4 weeks, not counting last week. But how many of those have been creative targets versus just sort of a throw it to him behind the line of scrimmage, cross your fingers and hope, and oh, he got 2 yards? Right, very similar to how they run the ball. The last thing on this: the Eagles are 8-5. The Dallas Cowboys are 6-1. Philly plays the Raiders this week. The Cowboys play the Vikings. After that, it's Chargers, Commanders, Giants for Dallas, and it's Washington, Buffalo, Washington for Philadelphia. So the Eagles have a very, very easy schedule. They've got one really tough team, a road game at Buffalo, but the Commanders twice and the Raiders once is pretty easy and seems like they should be able to get to 10 wins, if not 11, without breaking a sweat there. So Dallas might not have a real chance. But if the Raiders win, if the Raiders were to upset the Eagles this weekend, it would open the door for Dallas, especially if Dallas beats Minnesota. Then all of a sudden you'd have the 8-6 Eagles and the 7-6-1 Cowboys with 3 games to play. And are the Cowboys going to win out against the Chargers, Commanders, and Giants? They probably should. That Chargers game is at home, but I don't know that you trust them enough to say, yes, they're going to clearly win out. But it is possible where Philly in that scenario would have a half-game lead and have to go to Buffalo. So this could be a door opener for Dallas. The Raiders could help the Dallas Cowboys. I don't know how you feel about that, but they could. Shout out again to Alex for sponsoring the show this morning. And shout out to Southern California Bulldog Rescue, where we adopted our wonderful bulldog, Churro. Now it's time for Bischoff's Briefs. Bischoff's Briefs all week has been sponsored by Go Army Beat Navy. Thanks to Rob, one of our loyal listeners here at Technically Correct, for sponsoring the show with Go Army Beat Navy. They play on Saturday. Unfortunately, Army doesn't have that great of a chance. I think Rob's led me astray in who I'm cheering for here. Navy's favored by 6. One of my favorite advanced stats sites is Stats of War. Their projection is 23-17 based on success rate and EPA per play and stuff like that. 23-17 in favor of Navy. So I feel like Rob has led me into cheering for Army when they might not actually win this game. But Rob sent me this yesterday. Connor Stallion, who is the famed sign stealer for Michigan, the guy who was kind of on staff but not really on staff, but was stealing signs of opponents for Michigan. Connor Stallion is a Naval Academy graduate, and Rob told me that he served as an assistant to the Navy football coaching staff while he was in school there, and that statistically those 4 years are the 4-year winningest period in Navy football history. I love that so much. The implication without any actual evidence is phenomenal, because we can only assume that Connor Stallion was helping Navy in the same way that he was helping Michigan, and that's why they were winning more football games. Now, the Golden Knights won in overtime again. I know, it's incredible. They went to overtime. You wouldn't believe it. It is now 13 of their 30 games this year have ended up in overtime. It's 3 straight games and 4 of their last 5. And it's funny because earlier this week I was asking, are the Golden Knights an average team because they go to overtime against everybody? And generally speaking, if you're tied at the end of regulation, you're not necessarily better than the team you played. And if that happens every time you play, you're probably average. And they decided to take it to the extreme and just say, yeah, what if we go to overtime 2 more times this week? So I don't know what to tell you. Just show up and don't even play the first 60 minutes. Just play 5-on-5, or excuse me, 3-on-3 for 5 minutes and call it a day. But we got another excellent Jack Eichel overtime play. First off, Travis Konechny, hilarious overtime turnover that gave the Golden Knights this chance. But Eichel gets the puck in the offensive zone because of this, and he manages to hold on to the puck and make a terrific pass to Mark Stone across the ice at the back door for a tap-in. I don't even know if Stone needed to shoot. He could have just let the puck hit his stick, and it probably would have redirected in. But a tremendous play from Jack Eichel, in which he embarrassed Travis Konechny. I mean, legitimately embarrassed him, because Konechny has the bad turnover where he loses the puck while trying to make a pass, just completely whiffs on it. But after the unforced turnover, he's trying to check or just be physical with Jack Eichel and just falls down, because Eichel's changing direction and is not bothered at all by Konechny's physicality. But Konechny gets back up, and what does Eichel do? Breaks his ankles. And now he's back on the ice again, and then made that pass. Konechny looked unbelievably bad on that play, and he gave a good stick slam to the ice after Mark Stone scored, because he had the turnover, and then Jack Eichel beat him twice while holding onto the puck to wait for Stone to show up and put that in the back of the net. So another great play by Jack Eichel in overtime gives them the extra point. One thing on that, though, that was boring hockey, right? Like, at least the lead up to the game-winning goal, because we had a tied game in regulation, and the final 5 minutes of regulation, there was one shot on goal between those two teams. Like, what should be the most exciting part of the sport was guys just skating around, not wanting to take chances, and we got one shot on goal. Philly even tried to run out the last 15 seconds behind their own net, right? And in overtime, we got the typical overtime where neither team wants to take a chance, so there's no mistakes and you don't give up the goal the other way. We had 2 shots on goal in overtime, right? Thank God Jack Eichel tried a somewhat dangerous pass, because normally people aren't trying that pass. But Eichel did, and it led to a goal, so thank God for Jack Eichel and at least attempting it. But I'm not putting in the research to this league-wide, because league-wide it is. There are more overtime games this year than any other season. But have teams gotten more passive late in regulation? Is that what's happened? Is that a cause here? I don't know if it's true, but last night was certainly bad from that regard. Now, one other thing from the game last night, or not from the game last night, is Carter Hart not playing. So the goaltender rotation. Carter Hart started the last home game, and that was the first game he was eligible to play in. And the Golden Knights started out rotating him and Akira Schmid in every game. But then Carter Hart went back-to-back against the Rangers and the Islanders, even though Akira Schmid's previous game was a shutout. So they broke the rotation after Schmid had a shutout to give Hart an extra start. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but here's where I think it's most interesting. Bruce Cassidy yesterday, before the game, got asked, hey, is Carter Hart playing in Philadelphia? Which is, if you're unaware, where Carter Hart spent the first 6 years of his career before he was accused of sexual assault and didn't play for almost 2 full seasons. That's where he was. Obviously, the expectation was that Philly fans were going to boo Carter Hart. We got the report last night from ESPN that there was more security behind the benches for Carter Hart, and that the Philly Flyers did not do any sort of tribute video to Carter Hart coming back. But Bruce Cassidy, when he talked about this yesterday, got asked about Carter Hart. Is he playing in Philadelphia today? And he said no, it was going to be Akira Schmid. And then Bruce Cassidy offered up the explanation that Carter Hart, after the Rangers game, wanted to play again against the Islanders, so that's why they gave him back-to-back starts. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you can find one. But has Bruce Cassidy ever told us that he altered the goalie rotation because an individual goalie wanted to play a game? Has that ever happened? I don't think it has. And I'm also guessing Akira Schmid wanted to play in that game as well. But the reason that the Golden Knights changed their goaltending rotation, according to Bruce Cassidy, is because Carter Hart just really wanted to play again. What? That's the best they could come up with? That's it? That's as good as they could do? Like, if you're going to come out here and lie to everybody, at least have a more convincing argument than that. At least make something up about, like, oh, yeah, well, the Rangers and Islanders play a certain way that we thought Carter Hart was a better goalie against. At least give us something that's strategic, not just, oh, Carter Hart really wanted to play. I bet Carter Hart wanted to play last night. I bet Akira Schmid wanted to play both games in New York. Like, that is not how the Golden Knights make their goaltending decisions. And everybody knows that, right? And then Bruce Cassidy went out of his way to tell everybody that Carter Hart was going to play in Columbus, which is their next game. He said 99% that Carter Hart's going to play in Columbus. Cassidy never tells the media what his goalie rotation is. He never comes out and bluntly says, this is who's playing 2 games from now. He doesn't do that. Like, it's the most obvious, oh my God, I've got to say stuff to make this look like we're not hiding Carter Hart from the Philadelphia crowd. Hell, just say that. Just say it's going to be a tense environment and we thought we had a better chance to win with Akira Schmid. Because here's what ultimately happened. The Golden Knights wanted 3 things. They wanted Carter Hart's first game to be a home game, where they figured it would be a more welcoming environment than on the road. So they wanted Carter Hart's first game to be at home, which meant he had to start that game against the at home, the last home game for the Golden Knights. And then they want to rotate between Hart and Schmid pretty evenly. I don't think they're looking at this and saying we want to play Carter Hart 3/4 of every game. And Schmid has been decent this year. There's no real reason to just not play Akira Schmid, but they also didn't want Carter Hart to play in Philadelphia. So, and they didn't want to admit it, apparently. So what they had to do to get all 3 of those things was play Carter Hart, start the every other game rotation, but then break it right before Philadelphia so that Hart wouldn't play in that game. Just say it. Just tell us that's what you're doing. You don't have to come out with some crap about, well, Carter Hart really wanted to play that next game in New York. He really wanted to get back out there. Stop. Stop doing that. Just tell us you didn't want to play in Philadelphia. Now, Golden Knights, they play their last game of the road trip on Saturday in Columbus. Carter Hart's going to play 99%. But Golden Knights, 13 of 30 games have gone to overtime. Columbus is 10 of 31. Not quite as bad as the Golden Knights, but close. And here's my favorite stat on overtime right now. 31 of the 32 teams have an overtime loss. The only team that doesn't is the Boston Bruins, and they've only been to overtime twice in their 31 games. So this league-wide trend of everybody goes to overtime all the time, the Bruins are just not participating. They're just like, no, thank you. We don't want to go to overtime. We're not interested in overtime. We're just going to do everything in regulation. And so, like, if they would turn some of their regulation losses, if those had been overtime losses the way like the Golden Knights have, the Bruins we'd be talking about Colorado and Boston as the 2 best teams in the league, but they only lose in regulation. That's the only way they can do it. So Boston is like the most pure team in the NHL because of their record. Also wanted to give you this because Sinbin.Vegas had this stat, and I'm actually a little jealous because this is the type of stat I should be looking up. But this is before last night's game. The Golden Knights have led in games this year for just 29% of the time. And that is the 24th highest mark in the NHL. And this is the part that stuck out the most. None of the last 10 Stanley Cup champions have been outside of the top 10 in this stat. So generally speaking, if you're good at hockey, you're leading hockey games more than you're losing hockey games. And you're leading hockey games more than most other teams are leading hockey games. And again, we've talked about how average is this team. Every game they play is close. They're going to overtime all the time. I think this is actually a bit more damning of a stat than the overtime numbers there because they're just not in the lead. They're just not taking the lead in games or coming back and taking the lead and holding on to it for very long. They just don't do that enough. We also got this number, 12 overtime games before last night. The Golden Knights were the team that scored the game-tying goal 8 of those 12 times. So now it's 8 of 13. So the loser points the Golden Knights have gotten this year, a lot of them actually are rescuing a point from what should have been or what could have been a regulation loss and saving 1 point and getting that loser point. So there's some more numbers on this and how, again, I don't think the Golden Knights are bad, and I think they absolutely can turn it around. See, turn it around even sounds wrong because they're not bad, and they're in a good spot in the standings, but they're not playing all that well. And I do think it's there, but are we going to see it? I don't know. We've got to see it at some point before the season starts, and we're approaching 40% of the season here as far as games played pretty soon. Now, away from hockey for a little bit here. Notre Dame might not be able to schedule power conference opponents in the future. Ross Dellinger reported that starting next season, Notre Dame gets this special spot in the playoffs where if they're in the top 12 of the college football playoff rankings, they're guaranteed to be in the college football playoff. Notably, they were in the top 12 this year and are not in the college football playoff because teams ranked 11 and 12th this year were bumped out for the conference champions. But next year, if Notre Dame's ranked, 12th, teams ranked 9th and 10th and 11th might get bumped out for 12th ranked Notre Dame. Seems stupid. I don't know why people agreed to this in college football, but now Dan Wolken had a report yesterday that some power conference teams are threatening to stop scheduling Notre Dame. Now, he didn't name the teams, so who's actually making that threat? I don't know. But it would be a problem for Notre Dame because they're independent and they need those types of games on their schedule. Whoever is available in the second half of the season is who Notre Dame can schedule and should schedule. But the real problem in all of this is why the hell is Notre Dame independent? Can we stop that? Like, they're this independent football team that gets special treatment. Stop it. Just join the Big Ten already. Just play in a conference and make this easier for everybody so we don't have to worry about the athletic director of Notre Dame yelling at the ACC because he's mad that they offended his football program. I don't know. It's just stupid. Also, another update on Olympic hockey. Frank Saravalli tweeted this out earlier in the week, but Bill Daly, the deputy commissioner of the NHL, said the new target date for completing the arena that will host Olympic hockey in Italy is February 2nd. The first game of the women's tournament is supposed to be February 5th. So good timing. That's 3 days early. That's all you need. Is that arena going to be done? Are we having Olympic hockey? Like, they're going to figure it out, right? It's the Olympics. They're going to figure it out. They're going to have Olympic hockey, right? Now, the LA Bowl is going away. That's according to Brett McMurphy. The LA Bowl this year is between Boise State and Washington. That will be the last LA Bowl. So this bowl game was created in 2020. It was created to be a bowl game for the best Mountain West team to take on a Pac-12 team. Then the Pac-12 died, and now it's being reincarnated, but it's something much worse. But now that bowl game's actually going to be done. So the Bahamas Bowl is dead too, but there's sort of your potential sign for, bowl games might actually die off. Not only are a lot of teams saying no to playing in bowl games this year, but now actual bowl games are just not appearing anymore. I do wonder what happens to the Mountain West. Like, where does the best Mountain West team go, assuming they're not in the college football playoff next year? Not the LA Bowl. Is it going to be like the New Mexico Bowl? Is it going to send them to Hawaii? I'm guessing the new Mountain West next year does not have great bowl tie-ins for the following season. But hopefully, here's what I'm hoping. We do get some good Pac-12, new Pac-12 and Mountain West bowl games against each other just because of how much hatred there's been between these two sides. Call it the Gloria Nevarez Bowl and have her stand out there on the field while the trophy ceremony is going on because it's a lot of fun. But this has been Bischoff's Briefs, again, brought to you by Go Army, Beat Navy. Shout out to Rob for sponsoring it for the whole week. Rob, we really appreciate it. One of my best listeners now because you've used Bischoff's Briefs and you've used a sponsorship just to trash talk Navy, something I appreciate, something I love. Go Army, Beat Navy. Yesterday, I asked you guys on the show, what are your expectations for UNLV football as a fan, and gave you the hypothetical, is 7-5 a successful season, right? It's a program with 30 wins over the last 3 years, so 7-5 would be a big step back. But it's also a program that never got to 7-5 until these last 3 years. 7-5 until these last 3 years would have been, oh my God, this is one of the 5 best years in UNLV football history. So some of the responses, Rob Thank you, Rob. Gave a nuanced one. He said, I've seen enough bad UNLV football and know enough of group of 6 success windows to not believe UNLV success can continue indefinitely. I'm willing to accept a few 7-5 bowl game seasons mixed in with seasons competing for conference championships as successful. If they turn out a couple more 10-win seasons in a row and get to a Power 4 conference, that expectation will change. Robbie just blankly said 10 to 11 wins every year. Ramon said conference champion and playoff talk. So some high bars there. Danny said 7-5 with the same head coach would be a disaster in the new Mountain West. You can't make the conference championship with Boise State, San Diego State, Utah State, and Fresno gone. Unacceptable. Mountain West Championship appearance is the floor now, unless there's a whole staff roster reset. New York Rebel on Twitter said, I think the long-term goal is to join a Power 5 conference, most likely the Big 12, maybe the ACC. To do that, has to keep winning. So the bar is higher now, closer to 9 to 10, 11 plus wins. But for the old timers who suffered since 1984, 7-5 is still pretty good. And professional UNR hater on Twitter said 7-5 in that weakened Mountain West would be a failure. You don't pump as much money into the program as they have the past couple of years to pay a coach $3.5 million a year to go 7-5. So generally speaking, most of the responses are, yeah, 10 wins is closer to the expectation than 7-5. I do think the idea that, obviously, you're not going to win 10 games every year, that's unrealistic. But the idea of, hey, the bad years are 7-5. And honestly, the bad, you'll have a 5-7 year. But the bad years are 7-5. The bad years are sort of the baseline is, hey, 6-6, 7-5. But that's, hey, we go 7-5. The next year we go 9-3, and then we're 11-1, and we have some college football playoff talk. And then we're 9-3, and then we're 11-1 again. And then we're 6-6, and then we might be 5-7, but then we're back to winning 9 games. I think that's sort of your 5-year basis there. That's probably the realistic outlook on what you should expect from UNLV football. And maybe you want to be more optimistic than that, but that I think is sort of realistically what you should look at. The new Mountain West is going to be interesting and how good any of these teams are, but that's where a lot of you guys stand on your expectations for UNLV football going forward. Now, I want to do some UNLV basketball here. They take on Tennessee State this weekend. First off, Josh Pastner yesterday, he said that Jacob Benarbe is probable and Howie Fleming is questionable. So 2 guys that didn't play in the last game because of injury could both be back. It sounded again like Benarbe will play. He wasn't as sure on Howie Fleming. So we'll see how healthy UNLV is, because they did get Emmanuel Steffen back, but they still aren't healthy given all the injuries they have. They're playing Tennessee State. First off, a fun fact for you. This is the 4th team from Tennessee that UNLV is playing this year. UT Martin, Chattanooga, Memphis, and now Tennessee State. What's going on here? Did UNLV know where they are on the map? They're nowhere close to Tennessee, but they're playing all the damn teams in Tennessee. Pastner, some games are scheduled far in advance, so Pastner, he didn't schedule all of these, but I don't know how many he actually scheduled himself. But a lot of Tennessee teams. Now, Tennessee State, some fun stuff to know here. First off, KenPom does project a UNLV win by 9 points. That's the KenPom number right there. But some stats to know on this, because these teams are a little similar. Tennessee State's 30th in tempo this year. UNLV is 14th. So 2 teams that have played very, very fast. It does have the potential to be the worst shooting game in college basketball history, because UNLV shoots 28.5% from 3. That ranks 321st in the country. And Tennessee State shoots even worse, 27.3% from 3. Neither team shoots a lot of threes, because those percentages are so bad, but they are very bad at shooting threes. Josh Pastner said yesterday he thinks his team is a better shooting team than that, but again, we'll have to see it. Only, by the way, for some context, UNLV's number of 28.5, only 5 teams in college basketball finished last year shooting below 28.5%. There are more teams doing it this year, but we're still fairly early. But what UNLV's doing is like, oh, you're the worst in the country type of bad. And somehow Tennessee State is even worse. Also, Tennessee State's very bad at 2-point field goal percentage. They rank 354th in the country on that one. UNLV's better at 2-point field goal percentage than Tennessee State is. But the one thing that Tennessee State does well on offense is rebound. They are a top 100 team in offensive rebounding rate this year. And we just saw UNLV get beat up on the glass by Stanford. Stanford grabbed 48% of their own misses. The national average is 31%. So Stanford obliterated UNLV on the glass, on the offensive glass. And that was with Emmanuel Steffen playing. They had their 7-footer back. It wasn't a team that was running out, Tyron Jones as center for the majority of the game. Tennessee State's not tall, though. They do have a couple of guys that are tall on the roster, but they don't play very much. For the most part, their tallest player is going to be 6'8". So you would hope playing Tennessee State, the UNLV would just be athletically superior and be able to take away that advantage. But we'll see. I don't know. Here's also another stat for you. UNLV's 2 best performances this year are the road games against Memphis and Stanford. Both of those games came when UNLV had a full 4-day or more rest. Those are the only games UNLV has played where they have had 4 or more days off before the game, aside from the season opener, where obviously you had the whole season off-season off. They lost the season opener. But when they've had this rest in between games, they've given us their 2 best performances. It's 5 full days off before the game on Saturday against Tennessee State. Does that mean anything? I don't know. Team's been beat up, so possibly. Is it just a small sample size? It's 2 games, about to be 3. So yes, it is a small sample size. The bad news, though, if it is true, the bad news, if this is accurate, once January gets here, you get into Mountain West play. Well, they start before January, but once you get into Mountain West play, they don't have 4 days off between any of their games, right? There used to be these half buys baked into the schedule. Because the Mountain West went to 20 games, those don't exist anymore. So that 4 days off, not happening for UNLV once we get into January in conference play. So if that's important to UNLV winning and looking good, not great because of what the schedule looks like. All right, I want to try something new. I want to try a play breakdown for you here. Hopefully this goes well. I'm trying this out, so if it's terrible, please just tell me it's terrible. We'll figure out a better way to do it or stop doing it altogether. But I hope you guys enjoy this. I want to talk about my favorite play from UNLV's win over Stanford. It's the final play of the first half for UNLV. And what you're going to get here is Dre Gibbs-Lawhorn is up here at the top with the ball, and Emmanuel Steffen is going to come up and set a ball screen for Dre Gibbs-Lawhorn. So waiting a little bit for the clock to run down, but here comes that ball screen. Now, here's the key. This defender right here for Stanford, he is not going to switch onto Dre Gibbs-Lawhorn, and he is not going to double Dre Gibbs-Lawhorn. At least he's not supposed to. His job is to make sure Dre Gibbs-Lawhorn doesn't come off this screen and immediately go downhill to the basket, to the paint. There is a help side defender there, but they want to prevent that from happening. He wants to keep the ball from getting to the paint easily off of this ball screen. So what Dre Gibbs-Lawhorn is going to do is he's just going to go this way. He's going to go towards the sideline. He's going to go horizontal. And what it's going to do is it's going to create space between Emmanuel Steffen and the man that's supposed to be guarding him. So here comes Dre Gibbs-Lawhorn off of this ball screen, and look at all of this space between Emmanuel Steffen and his defender. Now, they have a help side defender right here in the middle. So there's not an easy pass to throw to Emmanuel Steffen that's going to get you easy points because of this defender. That's not going to happen. But it is an advantage for UNLV because there are 2 defenders on the ball. Quick side note, I want you to look at this corner down here. UNLV's got 2 guys on top of each other. That's already bad spacing, but it's even worse because this is Tyron Jones, who doesn't shoot threes, and this is Naz Cunningham, who's shooting below 30% on threes. It makes it very easy for Stanford to have this defender in the paint because why would you worry about a non-shooter and a guy shooting below 30%? They've got 1 guy to guard 2. But here's the key back to Dre Gibbs-Lawhorn. As soon as this defender, as soon as this big man takes 1 step backwards, Dre Gibbs-Lawhorn attacks the paint. As soon as there's a little bit of room for him to go towards the paint, he does so. And this is where he has beaten Stanford's defense because his primary defender has not ever gotten back in front of him. He's been on his hip the entire time. He's basically been taken out of this play. By attacking the rim, he has made sure the big man has stayed with him this entire play. He has never gotten back to Emmanuel Stephan. That has not happened. Now, if you look at this screenshot right here, Dre Gibbs-Lawhorn is going up a defender who's much taller than him. The chances of Dre Gibbs-Lawhorn scoring are pretty low here, right? He could, in theory, kick it to the corner over here, but that's not a high-value pass. Emmanuel Stephan is taken away right now. There's not really an angle. Maybe he could throw a lob up here to Emmanuel Stephan, but again, this guy's tall. He might break that up. That might be a turnover. The open guy is over here. Naz Cunningham doesn't have a defender anywhere near him, but right now that pass isn't possible. Dre Gibbs-Lawhorn is going to get right here near the baseline. There would be a possible pass out to Naz Cunningham, but again, he's shooting under 30% from three. That's not exactly the player you want to be finding in that scenario. So Dre Gibbs-Lawhorn has drawn two defenders with him. Stanford has done a pretty good job defending this because the guy they've left open is a non-shooter and he's the hardest guy to get the ball to. But Dre Gibbs-Lawhorn deserves some credit for this, but Stanford also makes a defensive error. This guy right here is going to go and help onto Dre Gibbs-Lawhorn. And so what it looks like is this. Right here, you now have, he's out of the play. He has never gotten close to being in this play. Big man is still all over Dre Gibbs-Lawhorn. There's really no chance for Dre Gibbs-Lawhorn to shoot here. That's just not happening. But this defender has now left Emmanuel Stephan, which means they got a chance at a layup. But Dre Gibbs-Lawhorn has got to get the ball to him. How's he going to get the ball to him? Can't really throw it here. That's a pretty impossible angle. Going up, that's going to be pretty difficult. He wraps this ball around the defender to Emmanuel Stephan. Wraps it around him to find and create a passing lane that probably shouldn't be there. Now, here's another key for you. Look at where this pass is. It's over here. Very hard pass from Dre Gibbs-Lawhorn, almost impossible for him to put that right in the chest of Emmanuel Stephan, but it means Emmanuel Stephan does still have some work to do because this pass is offline. He's got to readjust to catch it, which takes some time and actually allows two different defenders to potentially get back in play for this. So he catches, he's 7 feet tall, he dunks, and UNLV gets 2 points. But that was my favorite play because of a few things. One, you see what Dre Gibbs-Lawhorn can do off of a ball screen. Does he do that consistently enough? Probably not, but it's there. It's there. That's a great pass. That's a great read. That's a great attack on the big man in the ball screen. You also see Emmanuel Stephan used as the pick and roll guy. I'll see if we get more of that throughout the season. This is his first game, but it also highlights a problem UNLV has. They've got two non-shooters spacing the floor. Stanford was able to just camp a guy out in the paint because Naz Cunningham and Tyron Jones are just not threats from three. And to be honest, I'd let Kamani Hamilton shoot too if I was defending UNLV. There's just so many non-shooters out there that it becomes easier to defend. And Stanford had one guy who probably made a bad read, providing extra help on Dre Gibbs-Lawhorn that opened up Emmanuel Stephan. It still took an incredible pass from Dre Gibbs-Lawhorn to make that happen. I hope that looked good. I hope that worked. If it didn't, tell me. TechnicallyCorrectVegas@gmail.com. That's the email where you can get in touch if you want to sponsor the show, if you want to tell me I'm doing something terribly, if you want to tell me I'm doing something great. It's TechnicallyCorrectVegas@gmail.com. We got 2 weeks down on the show. I appreciate everybody tuning in. I've had a lot of fun these last 2 weeks, and you guys have responded well. It's gone well for 2 weeks. So I appreciate all of that, all of you guys listening. So see you next week.